Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Walk the Parks. My name is Blake, and today we are going to be hiking the Slickrock Trail in Canyonlands National Park. And as I picked this up, which is hilarious, I carried this the entire way, this little brochure, but I sure did lose it eventually. I just went looking for it through all my stuff, and I could not find it, which made me sad. I also looked online and could not find a PDF copy, but that is okay. Anyway, welcome. Today we're going to hike the full distance of the Slickrock Trail together. It's approximately 2.4 miles. It is kind of a lollipop loop. Like there's a short kind of stick of the lollipop, and then you do a loop, and the overall elevation change is ranked at 73 feet. I'd probably rate it slightly higher than that, but that's interesting. So this is described as an easy/short hike, and I would agree. It's pretty easy for the most part. It's pretty flat. You're on slick rock the whole time, as the name implies, and it does really provide a lot of awesome views, though, from the National Park Service website. This trail features expansive 360-degree views into the Big Spring Canyon and Little Spring Canyon, with the La Salle Mountains and Abajo Mountains in the background. And as far as accessibility, this trail can be rough and uneven. It is not accessible to wheelchairs. In winter, there may be snow or icy conditions. We recommend traction devices for hikers. And also, dogs are not allowed on this trail. Service animals are allowed within the park, or in national parks. So just looking back, basically, I guess I didn't film the trailhead very much here. There's just kind of a small section to pull off on the side of the road. You might be asking yourself, why am I watching this video? Well, there's a few reasons that I came up with anyway. I'd love to hear if you have other ones. First off, maybe you're headed to Canyonlands National Park and you want to see, is this Slickrock Trail that you want to do? So here we are. I will be kind of going through and speaking for, I think, most of the time. We'll see if I can make it the full 50 minutes, but maybe I can, maybe I can't. And so I'm going to try to give commentary the whole way, kind of just talk about the trail in general. We'll talk a little bit about geology. We'll talk a little bit about leave no trace, stuff like that. Another reason that you could watch this would be, say you're at the gym and on a treadmill, right? Maybe you're on a treadmill and the news is on. I feel like it, or I don't know. There's a lot of stuff just on in the background of the gym, but maybe this can provide a little bit better, a little bit better ambiance. You can pretend you're on this hike, or maybe it'll keep you motivated. You can see something different. It's like you're actually on the hike. I did film the whole thing. I tried to keep the camera pretty steady along the way as well. If you love it or hate it, let me know down in the comments if you want to, or keep it to yourself. Alternatively, feel free to mute me if you want to watch it in the background. Sometimes I'll put these videos on. I know I'm a little biased because I make them, but I'll just put them up and just have them playing on mute in the background. I think it's kind of a cool, if I'm working, just to have it up and kind of you can kind of be in a different place, kind of transform ourselves into the Slickrock Trail in Canyonlands National Park. Another reason for this video is kind of an accessibility thing. First off, there's some people that probably never go to this area of the country, never go to Canyonlands National Park. So this video kind of gives you an opportunity to see what that's like. And it could be for whatever reason. So some people might not want to come here, might not have the financial means, or they might have some other limitation that prevents them from coming to Canyonlands and seeing what it's all about. If you're one of those people, this is a video that can kind of give you an idea and hopefully make you feel a little bit more immersed in what it's like. So one thing you'll notice, you see these little rock piles. Those are called cairns. The trails in most of Canyonlands are marked with these little rock piles, cairns. I have a couple things to say about them. Number one, you can kind of look cairn to cairn. Some places there's not too many, and it's kind of where do I go? But for the most part, there's plenty. I would also encourage you maybe not to create your own cairns. I know it can be fun, and it is kind of a cool art type thing, but I don't know. Sometimes I know people make them and they're not on the trail, and they might not realize that. And then also, people that manage these lands have a tough balance, right? Between, you want to create this wilderness experience, we're in the middle of nowhere, and we really are in the middle of the wilderness. It's very cool. But if you have 5,000 cairns marking everywhere, every step, not the most ideal. So maybe you don't need to add like a cairn, if there's one every 100 feet, I don't know. Just keep that in mind on your adventures. Um, and then while we're mentioning just trails and markings and stuff like that, I just want to bring up leave no trace, right? So there's this concept of, we kind of want to leave, like, one of the most amazing things about this country and about national parks in general, as I tie my shoe here. I probably should have edited this out. My bad that I didn't. But national parks are such wonderful places, and I know for sure that I hope people 100 years down the line, 1,000 years down the line, can still come here and hike the Slickrock Trail if they want to, and it'll be almost the same thing. That's the hope. I mean, obviously erosion and all those things occur, but we don't need to write names on the rocks or anything like that. So just keep that in mind. And nobody likes to see toilet paper or trash or anything like that. So basically, just anything you bring with you, take out with you as well. The main principles of leave no trace are, take only pictures, leave only footprints, right? So you're just going, enjoying this beautiful terrain and scenery, and then leaving it as it is, right? Or even leave it better than you found it. Like if you find some garbage, consider picking it up, something like that. Also, I mean, if you are going to travel off trail, there's kind of 3 different places you want to go. I mean, first I'd try to stay on trail. It can be a little bit tricky sometimes, I'm not going to lie, for myself anyway, like on these Slickrock trails, just because you are on Slickrock and it's like, where is the trail? It's not like in the forest where there's a, 24-inch, 18-inch wide, strip of dirt. It's out here, it's kind of, again, you're following the cairns. All right, so now we're going to go to viewpoint 1. There's several viewpoints along the way, and I go to all of them. So we'll go to all those too. So anyway, I'll get off my high horse about the leave no trace, but it is a really important thing. And back to where you should go hiking. So Slickrock, like we're on now, is usually good to kind of go wherever, because there's not too much vegetation. You're not going to create a new path on it or anything. Nobody could tell if you went somewhere. So Slickrock is usually a safe place to go exploring, as long as you keep your bearings where you're going. It can be a little bit easy to get lost sometimes as well, because you kind of can't follow your footprints. But secondly, the bottom of sandy washes. So a wash is like a dry stream bed. A lot of times, I mean, as you can tell, we're in the desert. A lot of times the stream beds are dry, right? They only actually have water in them after a significant storm. So it's okay to walk in when those are sandy. So keep that in mind. Maybe walk in the bottom of washes is an okay place. And then on a designated trail, right? So those would be the 3 places that are okay to go. So it would be this trail here. It's designated trail. You can tell they're doing good. And one thing you want to one more note on that, something you want to avoid. There's this cool stuff called cryptobiotic soil. Like if you look at some of the dirt around here, you'll see it and it's a lot easier to see in person. It's hard to represent in film, but there's tons of it all over this whole region. But basically, it kind of looks like textured dirt. Like it's like has almost black specks on it or darker specks on it. And it's just kind of dirt. Like it's not a smooth plane of dirt. It's a little bit textured. But anyway, this is called cryptobiotic soil. And if you step on it, a lot of times you'll ruin it. And it takes a long, 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 long time for it to regrow. So even if it might just seem like dirt, no big deal, you should be cautious. And don't tread on that crypto if you can prevent it. And it's not cryptocurrency; it is cryptobiotic soil. Excuse me. So Canyonlands National Park is broken into 4 districts. I've always thought that there's 3 districts, and I've always spoken like that. So I learned something new. And just a quick side note on that, there's this thing called cognitive dissonance, right? Where we learn something and we kind of maybe we agree with it or get behind this idea or these facts, right? But cognitive dissonance is when you fail to accept new fact, right? Like if somebody tells you something different and then you're like, no, that's not true. But the reality is like sometimes you read a new book, gain a new perspective. Sometimes, maybe there's a new science experiment or somewhat, you gain a new perspective. I would just encourage you to be open-minded, maybe your mind can change about things of all nature. But anyway, back to the relevance here. So I've always thought there was 3 districts, but apparently there's 4. So right now we're in the Needles district. The Needles district is super super awesome. Highly recommended coming here if you have it. It's very remote though. Very middle of nowhere esque. You kind of go quite a bit south of Moab, Utah, and then you go down a road like really far. I mean, maybe like 20, 30 miles down the next road. It's you're in the middle of nowhere. It's awesome. It's so beautiful too. It's just like it's got to be one of the most remote places in the lower 48. Stars and stuff are just fantastic here too. I mean, there's all sorts of trails. There's some fantastic backpacking. Can be a little bit challenging to get permits sometimes, so keep that in mind as well. And you can get permits. Basically, I don't like to provide too many details on permits, and sometimes people are like, "Oh, you should give the exact details," but the reality is things change, and things are definitely nowadays too, right? Because there's like this transition to recreation.gov, and there's a lot of parks that are kind of in a transition period or kind of testing out like different. Are we going to do timed entry? Are we going to do you have to have a permit for all backcountry. Do you get it in person? Anyway, it can be a bit complicated, so I don't want to quote it, and it can change year to year. So go to the National Park Service website, and also go to, if you just Google, nps.gov, or just Google Arches National Park, and the nps.gov website will be the official site. And then recreation.gov is a good place too, because they sell a lot of permits and stuff like that. You can learn a lot of information there. So there's this section, which is just awesome. I love the Needles. There's also Island in the Sky district. That's a little bit closer to Moab. So Island in the Sky, which I always thought was a cool name, is, maybe a 30-40 minute drive from downtown Moab, Utah. And you're kind of up above, like you're kind of overlooking the Needles from kind of far away too. But, you're kind of on a higher raised plateau, almost like an island in the sky, if you will. Creative naming conventions there. But also amazing. You can get such beautiful views there. Canyonlands in general is just a fantastic place. If you can make it out here, highly, highly recommended. And then there's also the Maze district. So if you think, I was just talking about the Needles being remote, but the Maze district is like absolutely in the middle of nowhere. Like you have to drive down a dirt road like 40 miles, and even then, if you want to keep going on the road, you need 4x4, and then not even just 4x4, but like modified short wheelbase 4x4, and even then you might like be kind of double guessing yourself if you want to go there. But absolutely amazing. The maze is cool, so consider that as well. And then the fourth district, and this is the one I didn't really ever consider, but it's the rivers. So in the Needles is where the confluence of the Green River and the Colorado River meet. And you can hike out and see that, which is also a pretty cool trail. You can get to it a couple different ways. So yeah, 4 different districts of Canyonlands National Park, all worth exploring. I think, without having exact numbers on what districts are the most popular, I would guess that Island in the Sky is the most popular because it's so close to Moab, which, I mean, Moab's certainly not a big city, but it's certainly more populated than most of the other towns around this area. And then the Needles, where we are here, and then the Maze. I don't know where the river fits in, because the Colorado River is quite popular through here for sure. I've never been in the river through this area though, but I've always wanted to. It looks so beautiful. I know that requires permits as well. Now we're look at all these beautiful views along the Slickrock Trail. And a lot of times beautiful views, either means you're on top of a mountain or something. But in this case, you can tell on the Slickrock, there's not a ton of vegetation. It's funny as I say that. It's like we pass a bunch of somewhat larger vegetation compared to most of the hike. But there's really not that much. And even these trees, you can see they're not really giving off that much shade or anything like that. So be sure to respect the heat. Heat can just be a crazy thing here. Like, I would highly recommend, well, first off, like, when's the ideal time to come? So I would for sure say spring and fall are the best times. Winter can get really cold, believe it or not, even though, there's this kind of misconception that the desert's so hot all the time, but it can be super cold. Even in fall and spring at night, like the temperature fluctuations are very high in the desert. These rocks absorb a lot of heat and are so hot and are so sunny, but then they also like give off a lot of energy, and it can get very cold at night. But anyway, so fall and spring are the best. Winter can be really cold, so you might not want to come because of that. There could be ice, and you could picture ice and snow on these like surfaces. Might not be the most fun, and kind of isn't, unless you're prepared with like traction devices and have the proper skill and ability level. But also, I would avoid the summer. And I know this area is popular in the summer, and lots of people, that's kind of when you associate vacation and you want it to be warm in your head or whatnot. But the heat definitely needs to be respected, and you can get yourself into a lot of trouble. So just be aware of that. Make sure you're drinking to satisfy your thirst. That you're bringing water with you. But then also make sure you're getting enough salt. I feel like salt is a lot of like for the most part, I feel like salt and sodium, it's always like you should have less. But when you're hiking in the desert, for sure, you want to, it's hard to keep cause you keep sweating it out, and it's really hard a lot of times to even tell that you're sweating in the desert because it's so dry. Just the evaporation occurs so quickly, that you might not even realize cause if you're somewhere, like if you're in like Miami or Virginia or something, and it's 95, in the summertime, you're dripping sweat, right? It's like 100% humidity almost. You're just dripping sweat. Whereas here, you might not ever drip sweat, but you still might be losing a ton of salts. So just make sure to have salty snack. You really need to replenish those salts even without realizing it. So that can get you into trouble. And just be careful. A lot of people might be like, well, I'm from a warm area, but a lot of people from hot areas hang out in air conditioning a lot of the time. Also notice, as I mentioned, the vegetation before, like the lack of it. So there's really not a ton of shade. Like you're not walking through the forest like you might be in like Colorado or somewhere in the Midwest or Eastern Seaboard. You're fully exposed to the sun. So also keep that in mind, for sure, sunscreen. Consider, I personally love hiking in like a sun hoodie. A lot of people think like, oh, it might be a little bit hotter. It's really not. It's nice because I prefer it strongly just because you don't have to deal with putting on sunscreen all the time. I just feel like eventually sunscreen just gets kind of gross and you're like kind of just caked in sunscreen. I've been lucky enough to do a bunch of backpacking, and over the days too, it's like I will put sunscreen on my face, but other than that, I really don't like to mess with sunscreen. Usually I wear pants and a long sleeve hooded shirt and a hat and sun gloves sometimes too. I just feel, I read something recently talking about how skin cancer was like a really popular form of cancer. And that made me really sad and thought like, well, I should, nothing wrong with covering up. I know there's also a time and a place for like a tan or whatnot, but I don't know. Consider covering up. Consider wearing sunscreen. I even wear sun gloves. I don't know if I mentioned that, but as I speak this, I'm like, man, maybe I'm a little bit overboard. So it is what it is. Look how beautiful this is. Absolutely fantastic. Gosh, I love the Needles District. I love hiking on Slickrock. This hike is really cool. If you're super ambitious and really fit, my favorite hike that I've been able to do, I mean, there's really not any bad ones in Needles District that I've experienced. If you find a bad hike, maybe it's just because you showed up and it was 110 and it's just terrible. And that's just one other thing about the heat. Like maybe you're not that affected by it, or everybody kind of varies. I feel like heat is one of those ultimate equalizers. Even if you're really fit and it's like 100, you can just be crushed by it. But it can also just make it not that much fun, to be honest. Like you might be like, oh, I want to go, but it's like, oh my god, like on this trail, if it's 110, I think it'd be terrible. Like the heat would just be re-radiating. Like it's always beautiful, but just, I don't know, even if you're in shape and whatever. So anyway, just a word of warning, word of caution there. All right, now I lost my train of thought on the other topic. One time I walked from Yellowstone to the Grand Canyon. I actually made up a through hike and completed the through hike. I connected every national park, I connected every national park in Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, into Nevada, and then went down into the Grand Canyon, and did quite a big trip in the Grand Canyon that time as well. But That was amazing. And it actually had me, I did walk through the Needles District. I did not walk through on the Slickrock Trail, but I came through. I came out near the entrance station. There's some mostly I followed roads, like dirt roads, and then dirt roads that become insane dirt roads that are almost like, how do people drive on this thing? But it was an incredible experience. This section I remember being kind of scared because I was like, all right, so here we are going to viewpoint 2 now. Scared because of water, right? So I knew there was water in Needles District. Like I went to the visitor center and filled up there, but then it was kind of like, oh man, where is the next water? So I walked through the Needles District and then exited the park, went through what's called Beef Basin, and then went down Dark Canyon, and there luckily was water in Dark Canyon. But water is definitely an issue here. You want to bring it with you. Do not just think like, oh, there might be a stream. And a lot of times, if you do find a water source or a spring in your adventures in Canyonlands National Park or this whole area, consider leaving it alone, because you definitely don't want to bathe in it and stuff like that. Just because the animals around here, it's a rough life. They don't have too much. They don't have too much choice for as far as where they're going to get water, so they don't want to go in the gross water with all of our sunscreen on our skin and stuff like that. Obviously, if it's emergency, as long as the regulations permit it, drink some water. But if it's not, then maybe just let it go. But your best bet is just to bring some water with you. So cool. I love these like big, like kind of almost oval shaped rocks, like UFO shaped, which are so cool. This is a good viewpoint too. I liked it over here. What do you guys think? Does anyone have a trip planned to Canyonlands National Park? Are you going to go to the Needles, Islands in the Sky, the Maze, all of them? Raft on the river? I do like rafting. I just haven't really done a ton of it. I have done the full Grand Canyon, which was amazing. We went on like a 22-day trip, I want to say, and that was absolutely fantastic. Cold though. I think our launch date was on February 1st. It's very cold. All right, we're climbing the top of rock here. Time for that good view. So you can see me just holding onto that pamphlet that I'm going to misplace in my house later on. Pretty funny. Yeah, look at these beautiful views. So as I mentioned, the trail is about 2.4 miles, and it might take an hour and a half to complete. This video is only about 50 minutes long, 50. So take into account that I tend to be a faster hiker. I'm not trying to brag, just being honest. I do find myself, also sometimes if you're new to the area, it can be a little bit more tricky to kind of get used to following cairns, or kind of like, where does the trail go? So there can be more hesitation. Maybe not on this trail. I actually found this one to be pretty well marked, but in a lot of trails in the desert, like this whole wider area. So keep that. So sometimes people are a little bit more hesitant, like, where do I go? Which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but it just might take a little bit longer. And I don't really take too many breaks, and if I do, I actually try to edit them out, because it's like, you don't really want to see me just hanging out eating a candy bar or whatever, or having a snack of some sort. That's funny. I almost thought I was sitting down for a break there, but yeah, this is beautiful. I'm glad I explored this. Look how cool. So I don't know if this applies to this whole area. So first off, the whole area we'll talk about briefly is the Colorado Plateau. So whenever people hear that, sometimes the first time they think, oh, that's it must be mostly in Colorado. But no, it's there is some portion of it in Colorado. It's like very western, like Grand Junction, and Montrose and kind of west of those two towns, which are really close to the Utah border if you've explored Colorado a lot. But anyway, but then a lot of it is in Utah, the southern kind of portion of Utah, and then down to the Grand Canyon, and then over into New Mexico as well. It's kind of the whole area of the country that looks like kind of how I picture like Mars or something, right? You have these red rocks, these slick rocks, all sorts of cool buttes and canyons, just all sorts of features like that. But anyway, there's some, I don't know if it's true here, but there's some stuff in the Colorado Plateau where geologists think that these areas have been underwater, like under the ocean at certain times in Earth's history, and not even just once or twice, but I think one sign I read said it was like 13 or 14 times throughout Earth's history that some parts of this area of the country have been under the ocean, like 13 or 14 times. So, gosh, because I frequently think when I'm doing hikes like this or just anywhere on the Colorado Plateau, I'm like, how did this happen? And I'm sure there's a much more technical geological answer, and I'm sure there's lots of books about this that I have not read, but that you might be interested in reading. But I also like to just wander, right? And then I learn like little facts like that. Like some people think this has been under the ocean like 13 times. And then I look around and I'm like, I could picture that. I could it's crazy, but I could picture this almost being in an ocean. There's some places that have like all these crevices in the wall and stuff. I mean, there's all sorts of fossils you can find in all these like sandstone. It's really cool. So keep your eye out. There's tons of it. I probably miss tons. Look at me just going climbing and stuff now. But there's cairns, right? So it's like, all right, that's the trail. Sometimes it's like this too, for sure. And the Needles, there's some other hikes in the Needles that are just like, where do I really? And then you go to through these crazy spots, which is really cool. Yeah, and if you're more ambitious, like, my favorite hike I've done, oh man, maybe like Druid Arch, but that is a long hike. Probably would recommend backpacking it. You can do it as a day hike, but it's super long, and it's not just like the miles. You have to do a lot of like just what I was talking about, like the trail really goes up there and then down there, that's crazy. And it's also very easy to get distracted in terms of beauty. I find just myself stopping and taking photos all the time. Grand Canyon, I really feel like that a lot too. It's like, you make progress, but you're just like, I should take another picture. Oh wait, let me get that angle. Let me stop. And at this point, I've been lucky enough to explore the Grand Canyon a ton of times, but I still get that feeling quite a bit when I'm there, to be honest. And same thing in Needles. It's absolutely gorgeous here. One of the other things I like about this whole region, really, like even outside of Canyonlands, is a lot of times you look like from some of the roads. I mean, some places it's just spectacular right from the road, and there's lots of that. But also other times you're just kind of like, just this kind of deserty landscape. You see the sagebrush, you see the junipers, but then it's just crazy to believe that there's just all sorts of crazy canyons that you can't see, like even just from right here, it's like, okay, the Slickrock by itself is really cool, but who knows, a couple hundred yards or a couple hundred meters in any direction could bring you to the edge of some amazing canyon, like right here on our right. So, gosh, I just love it. Sometimes you'll see there's like these kind of dents in the rock, kind of potholes, if you will, and sometimes those will fill up with water, so that can sometimes be a water source for like animals, or you might see water there after a storm. Kind of cool how it just kind of cups up. But you can also see so this area experiences a lot of flash flooding. So when it is dry, but you can tell that the surface, especially Slickrock, it's not very permeable, meaning it's hard for water to be absorbed in the ground. Like sometimes I'm amazed on the East Coast, like it can just rain all night, and sure, things will be damp in the morning, but there's not like a ton of puddle, the ground absorbs like so much water. Whereas here, that is not the case. So what will happen is, sure, in some instances, the water will fill those potholes and there'll be just kind of water right there. But then in other instances, the water just runs off, and because the ground can't absorb any of it, so all of that water will pour at once down into these canyons. There's some amazing videos of around this area in 2024, I think in May, maybe in June of 2024, of just insane flash flooding. So don't take that for granted. Like, it can be hard to think that, like, this, that lower if you're walking in a wash or in a canyon, particularly in slot canyons and things like that, that is so dry. And you might think like, oh, it's weird. This is kind of looks like a creek bottom, but there's no water. It can change dramatically fast. It can also occur from miles and miles away. So, like, let's say we get a big rainstorm here, but then there's that huge canyon to the right of us right here, and then maybe just down. So like all of this is just dumping down into there, and even like not that much rain in a specific area can create a ton of water runoff because it's a huge area that's getting that rain that all drains into one place, if that makes sense. So, not to be scared, not to scare you, but at the same time, just something to be aware of. I've been thinking, there's been some news recently about, it's really tragic. Like, there is a lot of, not a lot, but there's some instances of people that get into a lot of trouble and get injured or even potentially die in the backcountry due to heat, or maybe due to falling, or, or maybe due to flash floods or something like that. And I would just really just encourage everyone, like, so on the one hand, it's, the more we look at our screens, and I realize, yes, this is a video and you're looking at your screen watching it, but the higher the proliferation of cell phones, computers, technology, in our cars, at work, at home, I think exploring nature is more important than ever. I think it's a wonderful way to kind of experience a different pace of the world. And while video games and stuff like that are so much and so much fun, and Facebook and TikTok or whatever you're into, YouTube is so cool. Also, all right, so now we're going down to viewpoint 3. Also, I don't know, going outside, it seems so healthy. It's weird. You see me actually check my phone several times on this hike, which I'm quite embarrassed by. There was a tiny, tiny bit of service, and I forget. I was trying to get some campsite or something that I didn't know where I was staying tonight, something like that, something silly. But even so, that's pathetic that I'm looking at that. But anyway, you can really get away from that, and it's it's pretty cool, like, to be able to just kind of have thoughts to yourself. You're walking in the wilderness. It's a kind of good pace. There's not too much. You're just worried about kind of finding your way and tackling the terrain and making it back to the car. It's just so fantastic. And I would just encourage everyone to try to get out there. And I love it. I would imagine that comes across in all these videos. But at the same time, you have to be accountable for your own actions. And we have to be really cognizant of the risk that we're willing to take, and also like of our skill level of what we're competent doing. So what I mean by that is this, right? Like, so a lot of times, and I don't want to stereotype too hard, but like, a lot of times you're on a road trip, and sometimes people push it a little too far, right? You kind of want to see everything, and not really have much downtime. But what that ends up happening is, like, you're in the car a lot. It can be stressful. I would first off encourage to chill out a little bit. Try to have a more mellow itinerary. A lot of people overdo it and go too fast. And I get it. You want to see everything, and that's cool. But it's not necessarily the most fun to drive like 500 miles a day or more at all. So for most people, and I've talked to a bunch of people who have told that to me. So that's not just based on my sole opinion. You might be listening, being like, I like to drive 800 miles away. So to each their own, obviously. But anyway, I would encourage you to slow down a little bit because what happens is, and this happens a lot, like I've run into a ton of people somewhere like the Grand Canyon, for instance, and they're like, I gotta go to the river and back. I have 1 day here. And I'm just thinking like, oh man, like that's so rough. Or same thing here, like if you're here in August, right? And you're just be careful. Like even a 3.5 mile hike can be absolutely like terrible. Like if you get to this point on this hike and then you have to make it all the way back to the car and you're just like, oh, you want it to end now because it's so hot. So just be careful and make sure, like it can be easy to like overestimate your ability in especially in nature. So it's like, oh, it's no big deal. It's just walking. But man, the sun can get you, or the elevation change can get you, or just the length of the hike and stuff like that. So I'd encourage you to like just try to be self-aware and maybe start on shorter hikes and just do a little bit and then kind of maybe do a little bit more and a little bit more, right? Like, so this actually might be a good hike to start on for some people in this area, about 3 miles. For other people, that's really long and it might be out of your comfort zone completely. So kind of, play it by ear like that, but just kind of gradually build is what I'd say. Just because, and I know a lot of people, like you kind of have to learn this lesson on your own, but just be very careful because there's a lot of places where the consequences are large and, you want to go back home healthy and happy, not get injured or have anything bad happen like that. Have I been too gloom and doom this video? My apologies for that, but I just want to be real with you guys. Like, oh my God, here when it's like 110 is terrible. And, especially in these canyon country, like a lot of times you're starting at the rim and then going down. So it's the opposite. Like, for example, in, the Rocky Mountains, like in Colorado, you're usually starting at the bottom or near the bottom of the mountain and then climbing up, right? And if you get in over your head, you're like, oh, okay, I should, I'm exhausted. I wanted to hike the 14er, but I only made it up however far you make it, but you're just like, oh God, I'll turn around now, which might be the smart thing to do. Whereas canyons, they can kind of lure you in. If you start at the top, you go down and you're like, oh, la-di-da, la-di-da. And then you got to turn around and you're like, oh, it's hot. I'm going uphill. Like you really don't realize how far you're going, and you don't realize the heat. Because you can be kind of like, oh, it's so pretty, and walking downhill, even though a lot of people are like, oh, it's hard on my knees, it is certainly harder on the cardiovascularly and just exhausting once you turn around and start going up. So be careful of that. This is like my safety video, but I don't know. I've just seen it happen to so many people. It's just important to stay within your comfort zone. It's just so much more fun. A lot of people, it's like you'll go and then it's just like we way overdo it. And it's just not that much fun, It's like you want to enjoy these beautiful places like we are right now. So the Needles District is named for colorful spires of cedar mesa sandstone that dominate the area. It's like a giant natural sculpture garden with towering rock formations that will leave you in awe. I'm getting this I just entered a little bit of AI into the Twitter one, which I think is called like Grok or something like that. And there's over 60 miles of trails that you can hike in Needles District. Also a super popular place for 4x4ing, but most of it is like fairly hardcore. Make sure to do your research. I'm not an expert on the 4x4ing. It looks awesome, and Moab in general is a mecca for many sports and activities, and one of them for sure is 4x4 roads or four-wheel drive roads or however you want to call them, trails. But it's a lot of them are very challenging. Like there's more mellow stuff, but there's some that it's like, oh my God, you better have a super modified vehicle and just be careful too, because I can't even imagine how much it costs to get towed from the Needles District. You're so far away from a town. Like there's one small store like just outside of the park entry, but other than that, I mean, you're far away. So and even that is just like a campground / general store. There's not really anything at all. So as far as wildlife, there's there's birds, there's bighorn sheep, which are pretty cool. I don't know if I've ever seen a bighorn sheep in Canyonlands. I'm trying to think about it. There's deer, various other birds. There's a ton of different lizards and stuff like that. There are snakes here too, but I wouldn't worry too much about them. Just be aware. So what do you guys think? Do you like the Slickrock Trail? It's absolutely beautiful. It's crazy to think too, like there's these the ancestral Puebloans is what they call the kind of ancient civilizations that lived here, and it's pretty amazing. Like that there's, even in Canyonlands National Park, you can find some artifacts and stuff like that. But there's been a ton of people who have lived in this region, and it's kind of hard to believe. I don't know whether maybe they, in their time living here, was just more like they got a lot more rain, like maybe there's 100-year period of more rain or something like that, or several hundred period. Now we're in like a several hundred period of drought or what. But it's hard to believe living here, just because how do you survive? Yeah, look at this view. Absolutely gorgeous. But like, right, so it's like a most places, or like in the east or something, like at the bottom there'd be a flowing stream, but it doesn't look like there's one at all there, right? So even water would be really hard to get. As we just talked about animals very briefly, sure, there's animals here, but not that many. So even hunting and stuff, I would imagine would be quite a challenge here as well. I mean, maybe I would imagine they'd use the cliffs and stuff to their advantage, so maybe they can figure out something like that, that would maybe help them. But just hard to imagine. Yeah, one comment here too, like as far sometimes you're seeing me use my hands. Just be careful. Like one of the big rules is make sure you can go up what you can go down. A lot of times you can go up stuff pretty easily. Like the slick rock, when it's dry, has a ton of traction, and you might be able to climb up something. But then when you're going down, it's like, oh my gosh. So be careful of that for sure. And then, if you're going down a canyon, also be careful. Like you could, because a lot of times you could maybe jump off something a little bit. So, I mean, not only be careful because you don't want to get hurt jumping, but also like, can you get back up? Make sure the answer to that question is 100% yes. So those are kind of that's like the main rule of canyoneering, right? So keep that in mind when you're here as well. Have I had too much safety talk here? So as a topic change, there's really only one, or there is only one paved road that goes in and out of the Needles district. And like I said, it's super remote where we are here, but there is something called Newspaper Rock that you pass along the way, and you might think like, I'm trying to go to Canyonlands, I'm trying to go to the Needles district, already going far out there. I would highly recommend stopping there either on your way in or your way out. There's really, I mean, it's probably only like 100 yards or less from the parking lot, and there's this super cool rock that has all these petroglyphs and ancient writings on it, and it's awesome. It's like so very highly recommended. Again, there's only one road in, one road out. The paved road does dead end in the Needles, really close to one of the dead ends is really close to actually to this trailhead actually. Other than the 4x4 roads, we're talking paved roads here. So I would highly recommend stopping and checking out Newspaper Rock. Very worth the minimal effort that it requires to go to. You'll also pass, there's a super popular climbing area that is referred to as Indian Creek, and you might see some rock climbers kind of climbing some of the cracks in the rock, like on these pretty cool faces. So you'll kind of look out for that on your way into or out of the park. Indian Creek is definitely popular among kind of technical rock climbers. So if that's your jam, go for it. So now we're kind of approaching the end. We're almost going to be back to the end of the lollipop, which I didn't even really point out before because it's quite short. Like you're really only on it for 5 minutes or so before you kind of go into the loop. As you can see, sometimes the cairns are a little bit farther away than others. I did find this trail to be pretty well marked, though. What do you guys think? Is the Slickrock Trail something that you would check out? I'd recommend it. Now, there is a campground in the park. Can be hard to get reservations for. It does book up fast. It's also not that large of a campground. Also, the backpacking permits in the past are in pretty high demand. So be sure to look, maybe it might be months in advance where you can get it. But also consider, sometimes if you've looked at the map and know what you want, and you're a bit flexible and you know what you're getting yourself into, I guess more than what you want, then sometimes you can stop by the visitor center and this applies to all sorts of national parks or forests or whatnot, but you can kind of see if there's any last minute cancellations. And maybe you can get in something like that. Certainly wouldn't rely on it. The best bet, like I said, is months in advance, like on whatever the first day they become available. I would try to book them, but just kind of keep that in mind. The backpacking here is fantastic, although restrictions are, in a lot of the areas you do have to carry a bear canister. I don't know if that's everywhere, but and then you also have to carry wag bags, which is for like feces, and you have to kind of carry out your feces. And a lot of times you end up having to carry a whole bunch of water too, because there's not too many natural resources. So it's kind of funny, all of that. It's like, God, who wants to go backpacking there? But like I said, all the backpacking permits are in quite high demand for this area, so keep that in mind. But I wouldn't even recommend going in the summertime. I'd be curious to even hear what happens if you try to book in a hike or a backpacking trip in July or August here. I would think that they would contact you and make sure, trying to double check you know what you're getting yourself into. It sounds miserable, if I'm honest. I don't think I'd want to do it. There'd be so much daylight too. It'd be like, when will the sun ever go down? I have certainly done my share of hiking in the heat of the desert, though, but it can be rough. That's the understatement. It's just hard. You have to be very conscious of like how your body, of just how your body feels. Like, like one thing that I've found that's really helpful for me, and other people really like too, if I offer it, is a spray bottle. Like you can buy a 1 liter spray, like a 32-ounce spray bottle. I'm sure you can buy really tiny ones too, like the dollar store or something, or dollar stores don't really exist anymore, but Dollar Tree, where it's like, I don't even know, $1.50 is how much stuff is now. But anyway, maybe it's $1.25. But you can buy, somewhere like that, or Walmart or something, like a small kind of spritzer bottle, and just spray yourself with water. Oh my God, it feels so good. And you can just do that. I have bought a bigger one, so I have like one that is like 32 ounces or a liter, and I'll fill it up. I'll use it as a water bottle too, so it like acts as a water bottle, but I can just take off the sprayer and just drink it, or spray myself with it. This is a good example of cryptobiotic soil right here. You can kind of see what I mean. It's kind of textured dirt, and it's a little bit darker, right, in a lot of instances. So that's what you want to try to stay away from as much as you can. All right, so we're approaching the end of the video here. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Let me know if you're planning on going here. Would love to hear down in the comments. If you have any critiques, criticism, compliments, go for it. If you want to be a silent observer, that's fine too. You do you, I'll do me. Again, if you muted me within the first 30 seconds, that's cool too. I'm not against you. But I hope this is a cool idea. I took the time to make a bunch of these films just to kind of share with people. Let me know if you think it's a cool idea, or if you watch it. I'm convinced really that the coolest way to watch this is either you're going and you're gonna check it out, like should I do this trail or what's it like, which I like, or what about navigation, which is cool. But then also at the gym, like if it were me, I wish I knew about this in times of my. There really, I mean, I'll be honest, there hasn't been that many times in my life when I've been on the treadmill a lot. I've been very fortunate to live in areas that are very scenic and tend to be hiking because it's my favorite thing to do. But just keep that in mind. Oh, this hike cuts off early. I forgot about that. My battery died and I wasn't paying attention, so we cut off a little tiny bit early in like a few seconds. Thank you so much for joining me. There's really only a few more minutes of the hike. Have a wonderful day.